Thank you so much. All right, if you have your Bibles, let's turn to Genesis chapter 37. We're going to continue looking at the Joseph narrative. Our passage for today, we'll be looking at Genesis chapter 37, verses 12 through 36. That's verse 12 through the end of the chapter. And this is, out of the entire Joseph narrative, this is one of the parts that's the most familiar to everybody, because it is one of the sections of Scripture that as we are coming up through the church as children, whether that's in Sunday school or Vacation Bible School or any other time, this is a very common story, and it's something that we probably all have a little bit of knowledge about. This is basically where Joseph's own brothers kidnap him, because that's exactly what happens, and then they sell him into slavery, and that is how he makes his way to Egypt. But what we're going to see through this, and what I hope that we're able to pull out from our text today, is that even in this difficult time in the life of Joseph, God's providential care never leaves him. There is a hand at work. There is a supernatural hand at work, and that is the hand of God that is working out this entire situation, not for Joseph, not for his glory and not for his comfort or well-being, but for God's glory, for the fulfillment of the purpose that God has for Joseph and for the larger people of God. And this is one of at least two times within this narrative Joseph is going to find himself in great peril. And peril is defined as immediate and serious danger. And so Joseph is not just going to be going about his life and a couple of things happen here, a couple of things happen there. This particular event puts Joseph in serious and immediate danger. But through all of that, through God's providence, we can remain safe, and we can remain secure, and we can remain in His will, even through great peril, even through our greatest time of danger and our greatest time of distress. And throughout these 24 verses, we're going to see multiple ways in which God works everything out for His purpose and for the ultimate good. But it's not necessarily comfortable. It's not necessarily what Joseph would choose as he's thinking about the direction of his life and what exactly is going to happen. This is not the direction that he would want it to take. But again, it's not for him. It's not for us as individuals. It is God's glory. It is for God's glory that we go through this life, and that certain things happen because of His providential hand. So, with that in mind, let's open this up. Let's read the first 6 verses here, verse 12 through 18, and see where our story picks up. Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." And he said to him, "Here I am." So he said to him, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a man found him wandering in the fields. And the man asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I am seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where are they pasturing the flock?" And the man said, "They have gone away, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. And they, being the brothers, saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. All right, so 3 places are mentioned here, and each one of them is significant in the story and significant in the broader historical sense for the people of Israel and for the Judeo-Christian theological perspective. The 3 places are Hebron, or the valley of Hebron, Shechem, and then later Dothan. This is the track that Joseph takes. This is where his father sends him to check on the brothers and then bring back a report to Jacob. The first, and I just want to point out the significance of each of these places, and then we're going to see how God uses them in a way to providentially and purposely care for Joseph in his life. The first is the valley of Hebron. Hebron is mentioned 87 times within the Bible. It is a very significant city. It is actually, even today, if you were to go to the Holy Land and do one of these Holy Land tours, it is mentioned as one of the holiest places in this Holy Land in the Middle East, in this area that's historically been settled and lived in by the Jewish people. It is actually the oldest remaining Jewish settlement that we have in the entire world. This Jewish community is very important to the Jewish people. It's very important to not just now in the context of how we think about it, but even then. You look at the history of this place, you see Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob will eventually be buried in this place. You look at their wives. You look at Sarah, Rebecca, and Leah were all buried in this place. And so there's not just historical significance, but even for the people of the time, this is a common place for them to live, for them to spend large portions of their life, and to actually bury their loved ones, bury their dead. And so this is a significant place that Joseph is coming from, and he's going to Shechem. This is the second place. And Shechem is also historically important, not just in terms of the area, the place that we're in, but also for Jacob himself. Shechem is about 60 miles north of Hebron, and this is a place of Simeon and Levi's slaughtering of the men because of the defiling, what the Bible calls the defiling of their sister Dinah. We don't know exactly what takes place here, but the language does indicate that it was some type of sexual sin, some type of sexual defiling of Dinah. And during this time, this was not only a sinful on the part of the male participant, but it's also brought great shame to Dinah and to the family. And so what happens in this story, I'm not going to go through the entire story, but what happens in this story is Jacob, the father, Dinah's father, and the father of this young prince who took part in the defiling of Dinah, whose name was Shechem. They try and work out some arrangement where Dinah will be married to this man, and they think everything is settled, and they're going to be able to move past this, except for Simeon and Levi. They work out a plot in which they are able to go in and they slaughter every male of this city, of this place. And so this is where we're at, and also is one of the reasons why Jacob and the family had moved away from this area, moved away from Shechem, because the text tells us when the story is being written that they are afraid of the neighboring cities and the neighboring people around them, that they will hear what Simeon and Levi have done, and they may come against Jacob and his family. And he tells the sons, he tells Simeon and Levi and the rest of the sons, it's like, if they choose to do this, we don't have the power to stop them. We will be overcome and we will be destroyed. And so they have to leave this place, and they have made their way to Hebron, but he still owns land, and he still owns property here. And probably the flock has used up a good portion of the land where they're at. And so he sends the brothers, all of them are said to be there, except for Joseph and Benjamin being too young. And so they have moved to Shechem, and this is where they're pasturing, this is where they're grazing the flock, and he's sending Joseph after them. But he gets there, and they're nowhere to be found. They're not there. They have moved on for some reason. And so he asks, a man finds him, and he asks the man, he says, they've gone to Dothan. And Dothan is the third place of significance here. It's of no significance right now. It's about 15 miles north of Shechem. But this is going to be the place of Joseph's great danger and of his brother's great sin. And so all three of these places in the Judeo-Christian history are very vital, are important places within the history and the life of this family, and how God works all these things out. And if you're just keeping track, Joseph has traveled from Hebron to Dothan. It's about 75 miles, all out of obedience to his father, all trying to do something good. His father is asking him to do something, and he says, "Here am I." And this is reminiscent of Isaiah, telling the Lord, "Here I am, send me." And Joseph is the same way, wanting to be obedient to his father, wanting to be obedient to God. And so he says, "I'll go. I'll go check on him and bring you a report back," just like a good son should. And he makes his way some 75 miles to find his brother, and for his trouble, they are getting ready to plot to kill him. But before we get to that point, this is the first thing I want us to see about this providential care. Not too much significant has happened so far in the story. He's just going after his brothers, but the places that God has sent him, it's all going to work out in a way that the bigger plan, the greater plan of God is going to be fulfilled simply because Joseph is obedient in going to these different places. And so this is the first thing I want to point out, is that we can see God's providence, we can see God's protective care in our geography, in the places that we find ourselves, in the areas that we may think that life just takes us or travel just takes us, but in reality, God has a greater purpose for us there. For our church, the majority of people within our church grew up in this area. Some of them didn't. Some of us are from different places. Stephanie and I and our family obviously didn't grow up around here, and so why are we here? Why, if God has brought us here to this place from somewhere that we weren't from originally, or if God has kept us in this area for some reason that we can't necessarily recall or determine right off the top of our head, what is the purpose? And I think that's going to be different for everybody, but the truth is that there is a purpose. The places that we find ourselves, the places that God brings us in the present, the places that God is going to take us in the future, and yes, even the places that God has brought us from in the past, all have significance because it's part of His providential care. It's part of the way that He looks after us, better than we can look after ourselves, but also because He has a purpose for each one of us. He has a reason for taking us to the different places that we've been. And for Joseph here, there's a reason that God didn't want him to stay in Hebron. There's a reason that God didn't want him to find his brothers in Shechem. There's a reason that God has taken him to this specific place for a specific reason. And I can remember growing up and going through high school and going through college, and a lot of people that I met, they were waiting. They were counting down the days that they could get through school. Whether that was high school or whether that was college, they wanted to get through school as fast as possible so that they could move to somewhere of significance. And what they meant by that is so that they can move somewhere larger with more people. They could move somewhere that was a bigger commercial center, that had more significance economically, or had more significance, in whatever field or whatever interest that they had. And so they were trying to get through the things that they had to do in order to get to these important places, because they didn't see the place that they were as very important. But what we see at the beginning of this is Joseph moving from Hebron, which is a historically Jewish type of community, to Shechem, where they had to flee, and then on to Dothan, which had no significance before he got there. What we see from this is that God has purpose in the places that God's people are seeking His glory. It doesn't matter how large a city is, if nobody in that city is seeking God's glory. It doesn't matter how commercially active they are. It doesn't matter how much wealth they have in a particular area. If the people there are not seeking God's glory, are not using those resources in some way to bring honor to God, there could be huge places, and there could be very significant cities where the people are doing nothing except trying to get more stuff for themselves. And it does nothing in the grand scheme of things to expand the kingdom of God. It's just they're just worried about themselves, or they're just worried about their city, the worldly importance of their city. But the importance of a place is not determined by its size or its wealth or its commercial capacity. It's determined by the actions, the attitude, and the work of the people of God there for the kingdom of God and for His glory. And so God's providence remains with us no matter if we are in a small place, no matter if we're in a large place, no matter if we are living a comfortable life, or if we are in danger. His providence, His purpose, His care remains with us no matter where we are at. And we see that with God caring for the family in Hebron, in Shechem, and then here in Dothan. Continuing on, verse 18 says, they, meaning the brothers, saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. This is what they're deciding to do before he even gets there, before they even find out why he's there. Because remember, again, he's traveled about 75 miles. I mean, this was not just as if he goes over the next hill and there is his brother. I mean, he's there for a purpose, obviously. But they said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of these pits. And then they will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, throw him into one of these pits here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him. Then we get an inner look into Reuben's mind. The reason he's saying this, that he might, this is Reuben, he's saying this, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father. And so when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and they threw him into a pit. And the pit was empty, and there was no water in it, so it was basically a well. Look at the language of this at the very beginning. Look at the anger and the jealousy that remains with the brothers throughout really Joseph's entire childhood. They don't just say, here comes our annoying brother. What could he possibly want? Why is he coming to us? I thought we would be rid of him at least for a little bit. They say, here comes this dreamer. In response to, this is God's blessing on Joseph, but for them they think it's just him trying to act as if he's more important. They say, here comes this dreamer. And then they don't just throw him into the pit, they strip him of his colorful robe that his father had given him. They strip him of the symbol of their father's preference for Joseph over the other brothers. And so this is very, very personal. This is not just something that they had popped into their mind. This has been building and building throughout Joseph's entire life. And I understand. I have brothers, so I get it. I understand. We fought all the time growing up, and we continue to argue and fight some today. But I have never said, I have never said out loud, I think I'll kill my brother or brothers. I think I'll come up with a plan, and this is the plan that I'm going to use. I'm going to have them take them out into the woods, and I'm going to kill them, and I'm going to pretend like a wild animal devoured them. I've never said any of that sort of stuff out loud, because that's the sort of stuff that gets you in trouble when you go to court. It is much easier to say nothing and then just have a boating accident on vacation or something. And so this is, you don't say this sort of stuff out loud. But seriously, this is by our text, we see that every brother is there except for Joseph, who's making his way there, and Benjamin, who's too young. So this is 10 brothers. This is all of them who are saying, let's kill this guy. This is how much we hate him. This is how jealous we are of him. Let's make this plan. Let's talk about it, and then we'll go and we'll tell our father Jacob that a wild animal must have killed him, because this is all we found. They plan to kill this guy until Reuben steps up. Now, if you remember the family tree of Jacob, Reuben is the oldest. He's Jacob and Leah's oldest, and he is the one that the oldest son in these families would be revered. They'd almost be thought of as like another father. They would be highly respected. And here, Reuben is the one who stops him. He says here in verse 21, he says, he rescued them out of their hands, saying, let us not take his life. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood, throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him. Now, there are two things that are happening here. One is the excuse that Reuben gives as to why he doesn't want to go through with this plan. To kill Joseph and then tell their father that this is what happened. A wild animal must have killed him. There's two things that happen. One is the excuse, and the excuse is, let our brother's blood not be on our hands. Let us not be directly responsible for his death. Let us not be this active participant in killing our brother. So here's what we're going to do instead. We're just going to take him. We're going to throw him into a pit that he can't possibly get out of, and then we're just going to let nature take its course, and he's going to die. And then his blood's not going to be on our hands. This is how we save face amongst each other, that we were not directly responsible for our brother's death, but at the same time we're rid of him, and we don't have to worry about him anymore. That's the excuse that Reuben gives to his brothers, and his brothers think this is a great idea, so they throw him into a pit. But the actual reason is because he is wanting to go back. We see this at the end of verse 22. He is wanting to go back later and rescue Joseph out of the pit. Now, this is a problem because it shows two things. One, it shows Reuben's got some sense of righteousness, some sense of not wanting to kill Joseph, wanting to actually save Joseph. But he doesn't follow all the way through with it. He doesn't stand up to his brothers and say, no, we're not going to kill our brother. This is wrong. This is sinful in the eyes of God. This is sinful in the eyes of man. This is something that we should not be doing, and we're not going to do it. He doesn't say that. He comes up with this excuse of wanting to spare Joseph's life at that moment so he can secretly come back later. He can come back without the brothers knowing it, save him, and I imagine the conversation would go something like this. He would come to the pit when nobody's around, and he would pull Joseph out of it, and he'd say, "Now look, you go and you tell Dad everything that happened. I'll take my punishment as one of the brothers that went along with this, but do not tell anybody that I'm the one that pulled you out of this pit." It could have been because Reuben was afraid of his brothers turning on him. I think it's more likely that he didn't want to be seen as weak in front of his other brothers. He didn't want to go against them in something that they thought was right, especially his older brother wanted to keep his significance, wanted them to look at him as being strong and wise and a de facto leader when their father wasn't there. But whatever it may be, he didn't go all the way through. He didn't take it far enough into saying that sin was sin. He went about it in a way that may possibly save this young boy's life, but at the same time would not make him look bad. And so the second way that we can see God's providence through the life of Reuben is that God's providence is acted in other people. God is going to use other people in order to do his will. God is going to use other people, other nations, other groups in order to providentially care for us. In the same way that he could use these other people, these other nations, these other groups to purposely punish us or discipline us whenever things go wrong. Think back to our story of Nahum. Just the last series that we went through. Before God is going to destroy Assyria, before God is going to use the Babylonians to come in and conquer Assyria, he let this nation come in and take over Israel. He let this nation come in and rule over Judah. Why? Because these people of God, Israel and Judah, had turned away from him. And so he's using other people, other nations, in order to discipline his people, to show them their sin. He could use other people, other nations, to providentially care for us, to providentially save us. For every example of God miraculously changing nature or changing something about the world, whether it's stopping the sun for Joshua to have more time to fight, or whether it's allowing Moses to part the Red Sea, or Peter to heal the lame man, for all these examples of miracles, God is going to work providentially through normal people in normal ways in order to care for us, in order to care for the church, in order to discipline us, in order to get us back on the right track. And one of the most amazing things is actually seen here in Reuben. I mean, Reuben's a great example of this. Is that he's going to use people to do this, even though people are imperfect, even though we're going to mess up and we're going to sin and we're going to do things wrong, and we're not going to take it far enough. We're not going to follow through with doing what we know is right because we don't want to look weak, or maybe we're afraid, or some other reason that's going to cause us not to go all the way. And God realizes this, but he's still going to use us. He's still going to use imperfect people to fulfill his perfect will, to providentially care for us in a way that we couldn't possibly care for ourselves. And so even though Reuben didn't take it far enough, even though Reuben, he saved Joseph's life for the time being, but he didn't call out the sinfulness of his brothers. He didn't disciple them in a way that would cause him to grow closer to God. God uses him in this point to get Joseph to where he needed to be. And at that point, Joseph needed to be in a pit. He needed to be kidnapped by his brothers. So Joe's in a pit, and he's waiting to find out what his brothers are going to do with him. And then this happens in verse 25. It says, "And then they sat down to eat." And I've always thought this was funny. I was telling the first service this. I thought, you take this huge step of taking your brother who is annoying and you don't like very much, and you throw him in the pit to die. And then you think to yourself, "I'm hungry. Let's sit down. Let's sit down and eat some lunch." I mean, that's just funny to me. Anyway, they sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, and their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry it down to Egypt. And then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers listened to him. Then the Midianite traders passed by. They drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. And when Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes and returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone, and I, where shall I go?" And then they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood. And they sent the robe in many colors and brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not." And he, being Jacob, identified it and said, "It is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces." And then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. And his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol, meaning I shall go down to the grave. I shall spend the rest of my life in mourning." Thus his father wept for him. We can see God's providence in people here too, in the Ishmaelites coming by and buying Joseph and taking him away to be a slave. We can see God's providence in the person of Judah, who takes Reuben's lead. And hey, it's not good for the blood to be on our hands, but he takes it a step further. He says, "Why don't we just make a profit? We could just leave this boy here in a pit to die, or we could sell him and we could actually have some money in our pocket." And so he takes it a step further, and we see God's providence working through Judah, even more sinfully than he works through Reuben, but still getting Joseph where he needs to be. And there are the slavers, obviously God working through those sinful men. But more than anything here, we can see God's providence in his perfect timing. In the way in which everything that works out at the exact right time to get Joseph where he needs to be. Now there are two examples of perfect timing here, and just think about the odds of it happening just this way. That this is the time that they would have the brothers would have moved the flock from Shechem to Dothan. I mean, that day in this particular time, and the fact that this is when Jacob would send Joseph to his brothers, and this is when they would decide to do something, and this is when the traders, who were not only traders in goods but also in slaves, would be coming by at the right time to get Joseph to Egypt. I mean, this is God's handiwork in the timing. But there are two specific ways that we can see. The first is with the Ishmaelites in verse 25. As they were sitting down to eat, after they had just thrown their brother in a pit, here they see the Ishmaelites coming by. Here they see these traders at this specific time. And this was obviously a trade route. This was obviously a place where people would be taking goods from east to west and from north to south, getting them to Egypt, which was a significant city, a significant empire, a place of commerce. And so this was a very common trade route. But again, the chances of the brothers moving the flock to Dothan at this specific time, God's hand is at work, and it's not just the timing in order to save Joseph's life, because if Joseph wanted, if he had his choice, it wouldn't be to be his life to be saved by being sold to slavers. It would be saved by, "Hey, get me out of this pit and let me go back to my father." And so it's not the timing in which we want the timing. It's the timing in which is perfect. It's holy. It's set apart in a way that will specifically fulfill the purpose of God's kingdom at that time. And, if we think about our own lives, and we think about the things that we have wished for or prayed for in our timing, it doesn't always work out the way that we want it, because that's God knows better than we do. Because if things worked out in our timing, we got everything we prayed for, we'd all be richer, we'd all be prettier, we'd all be thinner, we'd all be married to the jerk of a person we dated in high school, because that's what we wanted at the time. But it doesn't work out in our timing. It works out in God's timing for his purposes and for the plan that he has. And so Joseph, it wasn't his choice. He didn't want to be in that pit. It wasn't his choice. But it all works out in God's perfect timing for these people to be traveling by at the right time to get him to Egypt. But here's the second piece of perfect timing. Here's the one that I think is actually more significant. Because out of all of this, who was the person that first saved Joseph's life? It was Reuben. And Reuben is nowhere to be seen during this interaction with these slavers. It says here in verse 29, it says, when Reuben returned to the pit, so he's going somewhere. We don't know exactly where he's been. But when Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes and returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone, and I, where shall I go?" Okay, so at this point, he sees Joseph missing, and he no longer worries about what his brothers think about him. He no longer worries that they're gonna see him as weak. He tears his clothes out of remorse. He tears his clothes out of sorrow, and he says, "Where is the boy? Where is our brother that I told you guys not to kill and just to throw in this pit? Where is he? And he's obviously not here. So what's going to become of me? Where shall I go now?" And so it's not only the providence and the care of God. It's not only God working out the perfect plan of His will to bring the traitors around at just the right time. It's also part of His work and His will to have Reuben gone at just the right time, so that Joseph could be sold to these slavers. And at that point, Reuben's got no other choice but to go along with the first plan, to go along with the plan that they had to kill Joseph and take his robe, and they slaughter one of their father's flocks, which, by the way, they may have more money in their pocket, but their father's missing a goat now because they have to kill this animal in order to follow through with the story. And they take it back, and the plot works, and Jacob is sorrowful and remorseful, but the brothers have a little money in their pocket, and now they are rid of their brother. But again, they're not going to come out. They're not going to come out better for this. It's actually God's working in the life of Joseph to get him where he needs to be, to not only save his family and not only save his brothers, but to save the entire region, as we're going to see here. We see here a little bit later on. But all of that to say that God works through the places and God works through the people, and now we see that God works through the timing. And so every single aspect of our life, people, place, and time, God is working out for His purpose. God is working out for His plan to not only have His will done, but to care for us and to take care of us. Finishing up this long passage, because this has been a long set of verses, after they revert back to their previous life, the wild animal, Jacob mourns, and everything seems to be working. The last verse here in verse 36 just simply says, "Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard." And so, while all this is happening, while they slaughter this animal, while they dip it in blood, while they take it back to Jacob, while Jacob's mourning, they have completed their trip to Egypt, and now Joseph is in the house of Potiphar, who is a soldier, a guard, and a significant person who is close to Pharaoh. Again, not where Joseph would want to be. Joseph would much rather prefer to be back with his father, back with his family. He would not have preferred to be thrown in a pit. He would not have preferred to have to take this long journey, this probably difficult journey on him, from Dothan to Egypt, and now he's a slave in this man's house. None of this is where he wants to be, but it's all God's work and His purpose and His plan. I'm not going to get too far ahead of us, because this is where the story picks up next week, and we see God's hand at work in this as well. But all of this to say, this last way in which God's providence works in our life, we can see God's providence in unusual arrangements. So it's not just the places that we are, it's not just the people that we're around, it's not just the time in which we're there, but it's also what can be thought of as the position that we hold, the arrangements that we have. And so if we find ourselves at a specific place, around specific people at a specific time, that could be our work, that could be our family, that could be our group of friends, that could be whatever it is, all of this has purpose. All of this has meaning. Even if that means we are surrounded by masters and we are the slave in their house, God is going to use that in some way to work out His will through us, if we are obedient to Him. And this could, you think about the arrangements that we have. One of the big ones, I'll go back to colleges or schools or jobs, first jobs. You find yourself in these places, and life just moves so quickly. You think, well, this is just chance, this is just coincidence. There's no real reason behind it. This could happen anywhere. I could be doing this same job in the next town over. I could be doing this same job, halfway across the country. There's no real purpose in it. That's false. That's absolutely false. God has, if we are obedient, we're listening to God's guidance, and we're trying to work everything out. God has a purpose for putting us every place that we are. God wants us to do something with every place that we find ourselves, all the people that we're surrounded by, and even the positions that we hold. No matter what that is. no matter where we're working, no matter who we're around. God has a purpose through all of this. What I want to challenge you with today is two things. One is to think about how God has worked through your life, through the places you've been, through the people you've been around, through the time, through just the years, or how God has worked through you, and then the arrangements, the place that He's placed you. Not only just your family and friends, but also your jobs or your work or whatever you're doing at the time. What about through this particular pandemic, COVID-19? How have you seen God work through you in this particular situation? And the second thing I want to challenge you to think about is, how is God wanting to use you in the future, in this place, around these people, in this time that you're in right now? How is God wanting to use you in the future? That could be at home, that could be at work, that could be here in this church. It could be anywhere that you are, that you find yourself. Does God want to use you? Does God want to use you to raise your family? Does God want to use you to be an influence on the people around you? Does God want to use you to volunteer in some particular aspect of community life or church life? How is God using you? Because as we've seen, even in immediate and serious danger, even in peril, God is using Joseph for His glory. And God is using Joseph for His purpose. And if that's the case for him, how much more is it the case for us? That God could use us with our abilities and as a country and as a people, our wealth and the freedoms that we have. So I just want us to remember that God does have a plan, no matter where we're at. God has protection for each one of us, and God has a purpose for each one of us. It was true of Joseph. It's going to continue to be true of Joseph as we go through this narrative, and it's true for us today as well. Let's pray together as we close. Heavenly Father, I thank you for your providential care. I thank you for the way in which you have cared for us greater than we can care for ourselves. Cared for us in ways that we can't imagine and we don't even know, because we haven't thought about it, because we just taken it for granted. We thought it's coincidence or chance or just part of life, but in reality it's your providential hand, it's your guidance. And so I just ask that we would humble ourselves and we would listen to the Holy Spirit. We would listen to the direction that He has in our lives, that we would not just go through life and one day run into another and one run into another, but we take advantage of every single breath that you give us. We take advantage of every single day that you give us to serve you, to glorify you, not for ourselves, not for our own little kingdoms or our own comfort, but for what you have planned for us, for the purpose that you have for each one of us. And I just ask that each person here, each person who is listening at home, that we would recognize your great care, we would recognize your great love, and that we would use that to strengthen us, to fill us with hope, to fill us with trust, to fill us with a love that we can share with others, knowing that no matter where we are, no matter who we're around, no matter what particular stage we are in life, no matter what our position is, that you want to use us and you can use us for your purpose and for your glory. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.